Thank you for that statement, Mr. Cartwright. We now recognize Ms. Hinson for any questions she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Hoyer for holding the hearing today. And Chair Khan, I appreciate you coming before us today to talk about the FTC's mission. I want to go back to a topic that several of my colleagues have already brought up, and that's the CARS rule. Back in January, obviously, you issued that. It would exclusively regulate motor vehicle dealers, and according to the Commission, the rule is aimed at protecting consumers. But it does specifically exempt purchases of motorcycles, scooters, electric bicycles, and several other types of vehicles, all of which are bought by everyday consumers. And from conversations with my constituents, there remains a little bit of a lack of clarity on this rule, whether or not it applies to heavy-duty trucks, which I think we can all agree are not bought by your everyday consumer. There's a big difference between buying a cement mixer and a minivan that you're going to cart your kids around in, right? I think we can all agree those are two different types of customers. But under one reading of your rule, America's over 3,800 medium and heavy-duty truck dealers, including 92 in my home state of Iowa, would incur all the costs of that new regulation, despite only selling to other businesses and not direct to consumers. So nowhere in this regulation does it mention heavy-duty trucks, how they differ significantly from light-duty vehicles. So was it the FTC's intention to regulate commercial truck dealers who are selling to business customers in this rule?
Let me take that back to our team. There really should not be any confusion about the scope of coverage here. So let us follow up with you to be very clear about that.
Because this rule is absolutely silent. So I would like clarification on whether this applies to the purchase of heavy-duty vehicles specifically, along with, you know, you've got all these other vehicles that you've exempted. There's 7 other types that are exempted in the rule. So I think, well, I'm pleased that there's a little pause on it right now. I'd like to see it go away entirely, but at the very, very least, we need clarification because a lot of these businesses are kind of caught in that silence on the rule. So will you commit to me to follow up with clarification on the rule?
Yes, happy to do that. And just so you know, the way that we determined what's covered and what's not is basically based on our record. Where we see complaints, where we've seen persistent issues with deceptive conduct. And so for the types of vehicles that were exempted, that was in part because we didn't have as robust a record. And so I'm happy to follow up with you on this.
Yeah, because as I'm looking at the Federal Register, you know, there is wording here, other commenters, including Vehicle Association commenters, claimed that they should be excluded from coverage, generally contending such dealerships operate differently. So I would argue this is one of those cases, and so we definitely need the clarification there. Another concern for my constituents, and one that I know you and I discussed before, is the telework policy of federal agencies, and that includes the FTC. I think it's critically important that employees who are in charge of regulating American businesses are consistently showing up to work. Can you confirm that the FTC's current policy is for staff to come into the office twice per pay period or the equivalent of once per week?
That's right. The current OPM guidance recommends twice a pay period, and so we're conforming to that.
What is the occupancy rate for FTC facilities right now?
So for headquarters, it's around 22, 23%. Across the federal government, the average for headquarters is around 25%. So we're, just a little below that.
Well, we had the IRS commissioner in here last week, and I thought 50% was bad, and I'd like to see that number go higher because as you're looking at the raises that you're asking for people, $30 million in increase to support salaries at the commission, do you believe that that's a good value for taxpayers when those folks are not in the office? Does it have a bottom line effect on the quality of work that people are doing if they're not in the office?
So I think that's an important question. So far, we haven't seen any compromise of productivity. In fact, productivity is sky high. People are working around the clock. I know we owe you all a report on our telework policies and how that's affecting productivity and recruitment and retention. And so we'll be happy to get that back to you. But honestly, so far, productivity has been off the charts.
What are your metrics for measuring that?
So we look at a range of metrics, including how much money we're getting back to people, including how many investigations we're doing, how many lawsuits we're filing. For me, a big priority has been let's not just, focus on net number of lawsuits, but let's make sure each of these lawsuits is actually effective. And so we're going after bigger players whose practices affect more Americans. We're looking upstream to make sure we're targeting the root culprits rather than just playing whack-a-mole. And so by all of those metrics, we're having an impact, right? And we hear businesses, including in the M&A space, note that we are achieving deterrence. Illegal deals are not being proposed. And from an enforcement perspective, that's a good thing.
Well, I'll just close, Mr. Chairman, by saying that as I was flying out the other day, I was approached by a Cedar Rapids a police officer at the airport who was complaining about federal government employees not showing up to work when they have to be on the job to do that. So I think that we need to get that number up. We'd like to see a good return on investment for taxpayers, and I think that means showing up to the office if we're paying for those buildings as well. So thank you, Chairwoman, and I look forward to following up. Mr. Chair, thank you.